I hope everyone is good after Christmas and all the delicious food and hanging out with loved ones. Today we have this special episode with Amelie about her story from misalignment to harmony. It is a complete honor to have you here on this episode with me. We had the chat, I think it was last week,
Mhm.
about purpose, about mission, and setting an intention. And today I'm really looking forward to hear your wisdom and how you overcame these challenges and stepped into a place where you feel more comfortable showing up as who you are, which is so valuable for anyone living this life.
Absolutely.
Tell me.
Yeah. So just a little bit about myself. My name is Amelie, and I am launching my business, and I am calling it Solistic EQ. And it's soul, like Celestic, but soulistic, because I am a very deeply spiritual and connected person to faith in God. And it doesn't really allow, it's really funny how I grew up. So when I grew up, I lived in, I was poor. My family was poor, but we had our family, and my mother always loved going out into the mountains. I didn't realize I was poor until I got a little bit older, into like the young adult, or not a young adult, but like teenager age of like, oh, okay, I'm definitely not vibing with the materialism. And to a certain extent, I still have this like distance from materialism,
Mm.
choosing to have a little bit more spiritual and kind of higher minded thoughts. So, in naming my business and claiming everything, there's obviously kind of a bigger story in the background, because people that typically get into this business or into this industry, they're looking for something more. They're wanting to feel connected and to feel whole. And I've felt that my whole life, is wanting to feel whole, wanting to feel connected to something, which is a big desire of, many of us. So, um, when I was born, I guess the thing is, like, I was raised by a single parent. And in that, there's a certain level of trauma, especially since my father was not involved in my life. And the little involvement that he did have was a huge trigger for me. And I tell people about this a lot, in the amount of time that I've looked back into my life of like, why did I do this? Because I have a very high level of personal awareness. Why did I behave this way? Why did I act this way? And what can I do to change my behavior and my ethos to kind of put myself on a better trajectory? Mine is a path of personal mastery. I really want to be on all levels that I can wholly be a master as best as I can be. And so, with my father not being in the picture, that caused a lot of issues within my system of feeling anxious, and definitely these fears of rejection and abandonment were sitting there. And so my nervous system was completely out of whack. Did I know that at age 14? Did I know it at age 16? Did I know it at age
Mm.
25? No, I didn't.
Yeah.
But I did know that there was something that wasn't right. Now that I'm older, I can definitely pinpoint and say, this is where my body is. This is where I am fitting in. And here is what my body is telling me. And it really is this nervous system mechanism that we have in our physical bodies that are alerting us to maybe some of the missed patterns from an emotional response. Maybe it's from a missed pattern from a mental response, and maybe it's a missed pattern from the spiritual response. So the spirit is going to tell you first and foremost what your body needs
Mm.
on a holistic level. And if you don't hear that, then it goes into your mind. Maybe you've had those thoughts of like, I should go to the gym. I
Mm.
need to eat better. I'm obviously dysregulated and I'm alienating my friends or my family or feeling lonely or just having other feelings. Like you get these thoughts in your head of, I should do this, or you just get these mental nudgings. And if you don't listen to that, then you get these emotional responses, which the emotions kind of pool all these things together and pull it through your body. So if you get, let's say you get really angry at somebody, you might feel it deep in your stomach of like this anger, and then you can feel it kind of burning in you if you're paying attention to that burning.
Mm.
So as I'm like looking back at what my responses are, I'm pulling from even more further back in my this realm timeline because I think there are multiple levels of this, but we'll just start with this. I'm looking back at how did my interaction with my father at age 14 have an effect on me from age 14 until today? And I'm looking at that. What is the storyline there? And how can I change it so that it doesn't sit in my system anymore and I can let it go?
Mm.
So the misalignment is like the first piece. You'll start to notice that maybe you don't like to be around that friend anymore. Like they're not resonating with you. Maybe the job isn't resonating with you that you're doing. Maybe it used to, and you used to fit into it, but then you kind of feel like you're this square peg in a trying to go in a circle and it's just not fitting. And that's where the alignment piece comes in. Like you're wanting to marry these two together so that you are in harmony with whatever that is. Um, Parents and your parental relationships are, one of your first things that you are working with. You're depending on these people to take care of you at a very tender age. And it's not that I didn't have caretakers, but I think as I got older and as I developed, knowing that I didn't have this male role model or at least a replacement of that, of a father or a father figure in my life, had this huge effect on me. And I'm a pretty smart IQ smart person. Like I can see patterns, and I did very well in school. I was a straight A student. So I had these like perfectionism of like just be really good
Mm.
and then you'll be taken care of. So I had these really odd stories that were playing out in my life. And as you get older, you kind of realize like that's not enough to hold you. So when you have these rejections, when you have these misalignments, your body is leaking out energy into different areas and not really serving you because it can't hold you as a container. You're a leaky container at that point. My intellectual curiosity has taken me down many, many different paths. After age 14 in the debacle with my father, I started listening, I think around age 16 or 17, to some evangelist on the radio. And little did I know, because I didn't have the wherewithal to see further down the line what kind of impact that would be. Um, there, the it was very embarrassing for me. So in 2011, there was supposed to be this rapture in the world ending, and I had put that belief into my system. And then when the day came and went, it basically fractured every foundation that I had of God. And
Uh-huh.
I was very, I think I was like 26, 28 at the time. And so there was a really deep fracturing of my foundation.
Mm,
And so it really made me look at, if I don't have this strong foundation to carry and hold myself, how am I going to build to be a higher minded person and achieve this personal
mm,
mastery that I wanted?
mm,
So, just because that came and went and never happened did not mean that there weren't incredible lessons and incredible things that I learned along the way. In my connection with this evangelist, there we go, that's the proper word. In my connection with this evangelist, radio evangelist, I actually dove so deeply into the Bible that I like was memorizing so much of it, and I was seeing so much of the truth of it, that now that is permanently in my system, of these words of comfort, of these stories that have fractal meetings on in multiple situations. So it helps me to discern in moments when people need assistance, or maybe when I need to have a little bit more clarity on a situation. It allows me to sort and separate what the message is in the moment.
mm,
So it even though it was very devastating, it also showed me how important having a proper foundation and a proper frame that you can carry and hold on to is. So um, I know I'm kind of drolling on, but if you want to
No,
help direct
it,
me, or if
it
you think that's a
really,
good
yeah,
flow.
what really stood out to me is how you were really looking for that frame, and
Mm-hmm.
with not having it with your father, and having that faith and belief kind of crashing in 2011, which was your frame. That must have been really challenging because that was your foundation. Mm,
Yeah, and I was not raised Christian. I mean, it was kind of Christian. It's this like loose Christian where maybe you go to church on Sundays, maybe you go to Easter, maybe you go to Christmas, but it wasn't very connected in that. Um, However, as a young girl, I had this desire, despite the, I want to say apathy. It was just the people around me did not care as much as I did about learning about the word of God and the message. Like there was something inside of me that resonated with it and wanted to know more.
mm,
Like I wanted to have that. So from, age 6, at this like really young age, I was like wanting to go to the after school events that they would have, like after school
mhm.
good news things in the in the 90s. I don't know if anybody remembers those, but they would have these Christian events after school where they would come in and teach you some stuff, and then that was it. Like I loved going to those,
Yeah.
and I was the only one in my family that would. And it wasn't that my mother or my brothers or whatever, it's not that they didn't tell me no or chastise me for doing it. It was just something that intellectually and spiritually I was curious about.
Mhm.
And I spent much of my time in the woods. And so I would climb trees and just sing to God, because like that was all I knew.
Mm,
But like as a young child, I was like still having this desire for this masculine connection at
mm.
some point.
Yeah, and with that desire to achieve that self mastery
Yeah.
at that time, maybe the Bible and the teachings and the Word of God, what was that vehicle for you? You know, something to really.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think for a lot of people, they have these differing feelings about it. I mean, to be really frank, like I was raised fairly pagan.
Mm.
Like it was just an of the earth, like you're connected to nature and you see the truth of nature. I mean, it's not all sunshine and rainbows and love and peace and connection. Like Mother Nature is a vicious mother. Like when you're out there, like you have to know how to survive, which is what we learned how to do. We
Mm.
learned to what signs to watch for, what things to keep our eyes peeled for. You know, when you're out in nature in Southern Oregon, there's bobcats, there's bears, there's rattlesnakes, there's all kinds of creatures that are somewhat deadly. There's, you know, black widows, spiders.
Mm.
So my mother made sure to teach us like these survival skills. Little did I know that throughout my childhood into early adulthood, and even till now, there's still this remnant of the survival state. So this year, I've really dove very deeply into the central nervous system response because it's so vital to where your emotional body sits.
Mm.
And I've been observing people online, in reels, people that I've come into contact with, people who tell their stories. I've been listening and I've been seeking some sort of general kind of feeling of the community or the culture of people. And what I found, because I live in the United States, is that our central nervous systems are so out of whack. The lifestyles that we have is just work, work, work. And it neglects, uh, there's a heavy neglect of self care. And I'm very guilty of being a part of this grinder,
Mm.
so to speak, of the United States working system. And I've noticed in my own body that even drinking water while in this survival mode does not rehydrate you. The body needs to be in rest and digest at some moment and not permanently in the survivor fight, flight, freeze, or fawn moment.
Mm.
And I believe, and this is my hypothesis, I don't have any medical background to say what or when or how, but this is just my observations. I believe that ADHD and the rise of it is linked to a survival system overload, so chronic survival fatigue, basically. I believe that divorce is also in that. People getting into poor relationships is also a part of that survival mechanism. People having poor relationships with themselves, no self love, no self care. And even the obesity epidemic is also linked to this as well. Um, that's my that's my observation. So it's
Mm.
not medically backed, and there's probably naysayers or pro-sayers or however you want to look at that, but that's what I see.
Mm.
And it's until we can get into this rest and digest portion of our lives that we should be normally sitting in, um, and kind of moving away from this chronic survival situation, that a lot of this stuff is not going to remedy itself. In fact, you can eat as much as you want of healthy food, but if your body is in fight, flight, or freeze or fawn, it's not going to properly digest it because it's not in rest and digest.
Mm.
So there's a lot of mindfulness that the world needs. There's a lot of awareness that the world needs.
Mm.
And that's where my business idea comes in and where my purpose and mission, and it's so great that we talked about that last week, especially with the new year coming around, of how important it is to, one, move from that survival to rest and digest, and then also be really mindful of what your body is telling you. So being mindful of those physical cues, being mindful of those mental cues, and especially being mindful of the emotional cues, how you feel, and actually moving through it. Just
Mm,
because it's a negative feeling like anger or envy or jealousy doesn't mean it has to harbor and stay in your body.
mm,
You can definitely move through that. It's relatively quick if anybody's done any mindfulness um, and just kind of really sat in those things. Like I had to sit through sadness this year on a deep level. I lost my mother, I lost my father. Most of my family is passed on. And so I have very little family. And I'm like, well, what is my purpose? What is my mission? Obviously, I need to continue taking care of my child, but after that, then what do I have?
mm,
I'm very much alone and very much capable of a positive mission here. Now, what is it? And I think it has a lot to do with these curiosities that I have, these penetrative truths that I see in the world, and sharing that with the world of
mhm,
whoever wants to listen.
mhm.
And it's not for me to like go out and say, okay, everybody needs to mass feed on the information that I have, which is also another thing that we can talk about too, because I think that there is contaminated energy just as there is contaminated food or contaminated information that you can put into your system and it will dysregulate it somehow and put you out of misalignment. I don't know if you have
Mm.
any
Yeah,
feedback on that.
yeah.
It's kind of a big
Two
thing to
things.
chew on.
Two things. The first thing is reflecting on the title of misalignment to harmony. I wanted to ask you if you'd consider the misalignment piece be very connected with, you talked about the three levels, so the it being in a space where we are in survival, so maybe we don't hear the spiritual layer, maybe we cannot hear the mind layer, and so now it's in the body, and that harmony being coming into a place where those stories that have been burdening us, that we get to change and perhaps reframe, but also the that insertion of self-care practices, the mindfulness that puts us in a space you talked about, rest and digest. So
Mm-hmm.
would you say that those would be, in a rough way, the description of this, the misalignment versus the harmony, and that perhaps they sometimes even coexist um,
Oh yeah,
at the same
absolutely.
time?
I do believe that that is true. Just in me working on things, I kind of work on multiple things at a time. It's almost like you can dig at one thing, and then you kind of have to put it down and just let it sit, and then you can dig at another thing, and then let it sit, and then eventually the answers will come to you.
Yeah,
But it is an intention that you have to put out there.
yeah.
I so I basically was like, I want to figure out what the relationship is with my father.
Mm,
And I didn't actually, I've been taking coaching courses since 2021. I started with a self-worth course that I went to and did the work, but I had to do, I'm still doing that same course just a third time, just running through it because there's always something that you can get. And sometimes it's really nice having a solid person that can pierce into your situation and show you things that you can't see,
mm,
and or show you some tools that you may need to kind of work through it. um, I could be very misaligned with abandonment issues,
mm,
but my rejection issues, like I'm resolving
mhm,
and becoming in more alignment with it.
mhm,
a, a lot of that is like being really true to stories and identifying those stories.
mhm,
Um, I can't tell you how many stories I've had to deal with. Like one of them is my, so earlier this year, I was experiencing a deep envy and a deep jealousy. And I was like, what? What do you mean? Like, I'm not that way. I'm a nice person and
Mm,
I don't experience that.
mm,
I don't really care about whatever. And it was this woman at work that had triggered this response. And I was like, okay, well, let me sit in this for a time and like move through that. And so I moved through the emotion and I was like, but where is this coming from? And so this is the beauty of this work. So as I'm sitting with that and then I'm thinking about it, like, okay, what could have happened? What kind of wounding is this? I discovered that it was a threefold wound.
wow.
So one, it was a sister wound. So I had stepsisters when I was younger
Mm,
that were from my mother's boyfriend. And they lived with us and then they didn't live with us. They were with their mother in a different state. But he he would shower gifts on them because they were gone. And so he would get them jewelry and toys and just shower them with all kinds of stuff. And then he was a little bit indifferent to me. And I can emotionally feel it. As an emotionally sensitive and empathetic child, I was very sensitive to his treatment of me.
mm,
And then to see this physical adoration on his daughters with these gifts and not really with me and connecting with me, then I had this like father wound there. So I have a sister wound and a father wound, the stepsister wound, I'll call it. And then this father wound. And then finally, the topping on the cake is a mother wound of a woman, my mother, that is here to protect and nurture and guide me, of choosing this man who is emotionally distant from me.
right.
So then I had to deal with all three of these. This it's a very layered
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
But then I was like, oh, that's where the feeling is coming from. And that's why I'm having this response. And so this work is beautiful because it will show you those things and you can you can rewrite it and then it doesn't affect you as much. And maybe you have
Mm,
to revisit it a few times until
yeah.
you clear it completely out of your system and you get to this beautiful acceptance or harmony with that situation.
Mm,
And there could be multiple things that happen in your life that you have to do this with. But that's why I believe we're here. We're here to be this personal master of all of the elements of our whole being. And which is why Solastic hit, like it just came to me and I was like, that's it. Solastic. Like that's what we are. We're these souls and we're connected to this big higher realm of the heavens. And we're still living on this earth and this temporal field as a training session of how we can move through these timelines that we've agreed to.
mm,
I have a really strong ethos that we accepted a soul contract of our lives.
mm,
And the harder, I believe, that the harder your life is, and a lot of people believe this, and I can see how that could be true. The more difficult situations, the harder your life is, the more challenging the aspects are of your life. So for me, like having a single mother, having no father, having no father figure, um, being really independent, and having this disconnect from the masculine. I mean, I can go on, but having all these experiences and working through those and actually coming up in that to raise my frequency and my vibration is a huge gift to everybody that ever comes in contact with me.
mm,
It's not uncommon that I get this response of incredible magnetism from people. They're very magnetized to me, especially if I meet them
mm,
face to face. They're like, there's something about you that I just need to know. Women, men, it doesn't even matter. They're just
yeah.
like very magnetized and drawn. And so part of it, I think, is because I'm a reflector. So I have really open, all my chakral points are open. And so I kind of receive a lot of things from my environment, from people, situations. It's a gift and it's also a little bit of a curse. It's not the best, but um, it does give me a little bit of a it gives me a little bit of a different personality perspective than other human design elements would. And I mean, I had never even heard of human design until 2022. I was taking this course, and part of it was to do an astrological profile and then do a human design profile and then a gene keys profile. And I had never heard of the human design and the gene keys. It was very new to me. And I was like, what is this? I had no clue. And so it was a group of five of us women. And so we're all sharing. And I was like, oh, I'm a reflector. And it, I cried a few times when I heard that. In that, I've always had this alien feeling about me. If that lands for anybody, you guys know what I'm talking about. But there's like an alien feeling that you have when you're attempting to connect with people. It's like you know them, but then there's this distant alien feeling of not being connected. And then to be like a rare personality type was almost a affirmation that yeah, you
Mm,
are different,
mm,
and it will be harder for you to connect with people.
mm,
And so it like really hit on this rejection wound or
mm,
abandonment wound that I was working on at the time. And so I hadn't even really started working on it a little bit, but not as much as I have now. And so I cried. I cried because like there was this deep yearning inside of me
mm,
from an early age that I wanted to be accepted and connected to people. And then it just kind of felt like all the oxygen was taken out of my desire.
yeah,
And then it was like, oh, you have a different life path that you're going to
mm,
have to accept.
yeah. And I can imagine the feeling of that deep yearning that you're talking about, of feeling seen and understood,
Mhm.
and so beautiful. And tell me a little bit about, because you said that you cried in that moment. What happened, even inside that community as you all shared all of these together? How was that for you, to that bit of you to feel that, and what happened as a result, you think?
So I think over time, it's shown me it's it's like the prism that a light hits. It's shown me just different aspects of myself that I have available to help others.
Mm,
So for me, acts of service are a huge thing. Being an empath and then also being a reflector, there's like this really motherly, nurturing nature that I have about myself. So I have this personal purpose and mission to help people, one, love themselves, and two, see the truth
mm,
as best as they can in their situation.
mm,
Um, I believe that we're always going to be unlocking these beautiful truths about the universe and about ourselves and about others. And we're always going to be sitting in this awe if we're in this path of discerning and finding and desiring truth and wisdom. So truth and wisdom like have been automatically gifted to me, even though like I struggled with it so much. And I I think all of the feelings of being misunderstood and then just disconnected from the people around me and kind of being shunned
mm,
and not like part of the crowd. I think that those aspects were like kind of hit really deeply. And I had to
mm,
cry about it because I was
yeah,
like, oh, this is almost a affirming those feelings.
Yeah.
And then I had to rewrite the story of
Mm.
people want to be around me. They
Mm,
want to hear what I have to say,
it's beautiful.
and they will be gifted in hearing what I had to say.
Wow.
Now, this last week, I've really been diving into acceptance. And this is, I'm actually going to be writing a book. I have an outline of misalignment to harmony. And one of the chapters I have, it's near the end, is acceptance. The acceptance piece is very important. And it doesn't mean that you have to love and be like happy about it, but there is a truth in the acceptance, and then saying, okay, I'm accepting that, and now I can go move into another area. And the acceptance that I had last week was, or earlier this week, it's kind of been over the week, um, was about like Jesus's life. So Jesus is the Son of God. He came to share these truths and wisdoms and to be a savior. And this is a fractal truth, like we can all live in our lives. Not that we're getting crucified, but we can feel the feelings of crucifixion in like little jaunts of our life. Like if you ever have kind of a hate group come at you of you did this and whatever, that's like almost a public crucifixion in our day.
Mm.
And so I was watching the Chosen show season 4 because I hadn't seen it yet, and I have all this time off right now because it's the holidays, and I'm watching and just knowing all the stories of Jesus's life, and I'm also listening to all these Christmas songs of peace on earth, goodwill towards men, and all these like really feel good things. And then I'm like listening to, this adaptation of Jesus's time here on earth. And he's like, I haven't come here to bring peace, but a sword. And what does that mean? Like, people are going to hear the truth and they could have a positive reaction to it, or they can have a negative, hateful reaction to it. There's just two pieces of that. Even though he was in complete harmony, he's the Son of God, he's perfect. His words were a sword that divided people. And I have to realize in my fractal life that if I'm going to say truths to somebody, I could uh, be easily seen as a hero or a savior type, or I could be seen as this villain type. And it actually played
Mm.
out in a situation where I was talking to somebody and we were having a deep conversation. And then all of a sudden they're like, didn't want to hear anymore, told me to go away. And I was like, okay. And I had to
Mm.
accept that they didn't want to hear that truth. So there's a hero slash villain piece in telling the truth, and there's a hero slash villain piece in telling a wisdom about something that I think a lot of people, when they're putting themselves in these positions of authority of teaching people, that they also have to learn to accept. Like, not everybody wants to hear your message. In fact, there could be heavy vitriol and dissent on your message, and how are you going to react to that? So for me, as I step into this business and I step into this teaching, which is my purpose and my mission here, I also have to like learn to accept the rejection
Mm.
and the abandonment
Mm.
and the hatred and the vitriol that I could be getting, and know that it's not me. It's not me. It's them. It's
Mm.
their dysregulation in themselves. And so I have to kind of learn to accept that as well. So I did this really long 3 hour stream the other day, and I think maybe we chatted about it, but I did have a chat about it in one of my videos. And I said, healing is ugly. I made that claim. Healing is ugly. I mean, it's beautiful once you're like healed in a certain aspect. Like it feels good to feel confident about the direction that I'm going in my business. It feels good knowing that I have my first client that's ready to sign on and that there's more people out there that are ready to work with me. And so it feels good to feel confident, but I also have to feel good in those negative messages at me as well. I have to feel good in those and change the story of it's not you, it's them and they're working through things. And maybe it takes them a year or two to kind of sit in that truth
Mm,
and realign in their own being of like, I didn't see it before, but now I see it.
mm,
And we just have all these beautiful fractal situations. And I don't know if
mm,
the people here know what fractals are, but like fractal being like in the Fibonacci sequence, it's like the same pattern is seen like even at the tiny center of the Fibonacci sequence or at the end of it. Like it's just a repeating pattern or a
mm,
repeating universal truth that we can take and digest.
mhm. And I think that there's something that is also that I feel that is important to reflect on is that it's what is true to us. As we step out there and share our message, it's our message. Um, and I think that a lot of times, yes, there's a lot of projections, and there can be the savior, and there can be the villain, and part of the journey is to see a human.
Mhm.
That we all have all these different archetypes, let's say, within
Yeah.
us, and we are not just one or the other. We have both, and this projection, this desire to have a savior or desire to have a villain that can act as a scapegoat, it's also a call to look within and see what are the aspects of us that we are not yet taking ownership of. But that also, I think that for us as people who show up to share our message, we also have part of the responsibility. So, in terms of, yes, a lot of it is about them, but we also bring something to the
Mhm.
table. And so I think we need to meet in the middle. If I think about our position of power that we all could have access to by making posts on social media and share our voice and our message, we can do it in many different ways. I often reflect on how can I write this without shaming people? Because even though not everyone will feel shame when they read my words, I don't have any control over that. But I can choose and reflect on how I'm writing my message to not shame. And that is very much under my control.
Mhm.
So I like to reflect on that part to know that on my side, I'm staying aware and thoughtful and considerate of how I'm sharing it and what I'm sharing. And then it's up to the people who read it to decide or choose how they receive it. But I do think we have some responsibility on the delivery of something, and there's a need of owning that it's our truth. Even if we are very passionate about something, it might not be the absolute truth of something.
Yeah. One of the things that I learned in the past few years is there's some universal truths. One of them is the law of consent.
Mm.
So we're responsible for what we consume. We're consenting to certain things, and we need to look at what we're consenting to. So you may be consenting to something that you disagree with, but you're consenting to it anyways. And once I discovered that, it was a lot easier for me to move through difficult things. So I talked a little bit about breaking my foundation in 2011 and how it was a dark night of the soul. I remember laying in my room and I closed all the curtains and it was completely dark. And I was just calling out to God of like, I need you. I feel desolate. I'm not, I don't know what to do. My life is out of control. I'm in utter chaos. I don't know what direction to go. I need you to help me. And once I had kind of broken down and been humbled in that, then it was a pretty quick bounce back, a recovery, let's say. And that doesn't mean that's the only dark night of the soul that I have had. Like I've had several dark nights of the soul, dark nights of the soul, even in this year. So just thinking you're going to have one is not enough. But that law of consent, like I was consenting to a certain way I was being treated. I was consenting to a lack of self love. I was consenting to uh, relationships that weren't in my benefit. And then I was consenting to kind of being blind to it all and accepting life as it was coming,
Mm.
which is still a consent. So I hear a lot of people that complain about their lives or blame others for things that are happening in their lives. And I'm like, but at the end of the day, what are you consenting to in those situations that you could change and say, no, I'm not consenting to that anymore? And thus, it kind of reframes, the universe has this interesting way of reframing
Mm.
how that comes to you. Because
Mm.
then now you can say, I don't consent to that. I consent to this. And then you have this authority and power
Mm.
that you're managing and you're
Right.
controlling instead of being subject to others.
Right.
The other thing about authority that I take very seriously and why I've kind of been like on this fence of do I start my business or not is the authority of teaching others and knowing that I could be wrong. And um, there's a phrase out there that's I may be wrong, but I'm not lying. And so if you truly believe that you're telling a truth, but maybe there's this like piece that you don't see, but in the moment you're like, but all the evidence that I have now is telling me that yes, this is true. And maybe there's something that you have to shift. It's like taking ownership of that thing and saying, I was teaching this way and I have to change that because I discovered this new thing that has shifted the way that I see it.
Mm.
And being really accepting and owning that in a healthy way of being responsible of having authority over others. So that's where I kind of sit with authority. So
Mm.
until I can sit with that properly in my body, I was kind of having this hesitation of being
Yeah.
seen because I was like, somebody's going to call me out for being
Right.
some sort of charlatan or con person or
I
just
hear
like
you.
imposter. And it's a very real, visceral feeling
Yeah.
to have people call you out. But then it's also like if you can accept it and say, "Wow, I didn't see it from that perspective.
Mm.
Thank you for sharing that with me and showing me the truth in that." Versus, "No, you're wrong," and then you start this like blame,
Yeah.
hatred game of like disconnecting.
Mm.
And then even if somebody presents something and says, well, you don't see it from my perspective, and it still doesn't sit well with you, you can say, I honor where you're coming from, but I just still don't see it from that perspective. I'm still going to
Mm.
continue standing in my message and continue sharing the message as I believe it is true.
Mm.
Um, so consent, ownership, authority, and then trying to think of another. I know that there's so many things that I've learned. Um, I think the last thing is having that personal power and confidence in yourself. So, personal power is one of the pieces of self awareness that we run through. And there's very polarizing things in everything that I'm talking about. And it's the polarizing corruption that I'm here to weed out and to go into like equilibrium or harmony with. That's my purpose gene key. So it's my in gene keys, there's like a week at a time, and it has this certain resonance of things that you're learning in your gates. So you're born, whatever your birth date is, you have like mine's gene key 50, which is corruption, equilibrium, and or harmony and equilibrium. And then there's another one, gene key. What is it? I can't remember that, but it's like you have these two sides. You have the conscious and the subconscious, like direction. And that's what I use to help kind of guide people into their purpose of you know what is speaking to you. So I was speaking to somebody this week about human design, and theirs was 12, and it was it was about purity and about them being and sharing and implementing that purpose into their life of purity. And how do they do that? They have to figure that out. I can't give you the roadmap to all the things that you're going to need to be really awesome. It takes a lot of personal work to get to elevated pieces of us. So in my in my polarizing situation, in the personal power and confidence that we have, I've found that this personal power has a lot to do with the empath and the narcissist. And the narcissist is like a super polarizing character personality trait. There's tons and tons of people that are like, my ex is the narcissist, my boss is a narcissist, my dad is a narcissist, or whoever is a narcissist. And it's this blame game of, I don't have the best life because I was run over by a narcissist. And so, so I was like, this is a very polarizing topic, right?
Mm.
People are going to side with the, oh yeah, the narcissist is the worst person in the world. You never want to be around them. They're never going to be healed from that, and they can't learn because they have very low self-awareness. They're using people, they're deceiving people, they're guilting people, they're using their charm to get their way. And I'm like, okay, well, so I did some research. I went and I did some research. Now I would consider myself very empathetic. We already talked about how like I have these open centers. I'm also like a woman. I have this very receptive personality of like kind of bringing things in and like doling it out. I have a huge service to others, like access service with others, personality. But I see like all these negative traits of the empath. And part of that is just being this doormat, this rug that people can walk on because I won't say no to somebody that's asking me for help. Now, that lack of boundary is not the best. It's not the best for me. It's not building me up. In fact, it almost hurts a little bit more than it helps. And so I got to thinking, and I'm like, well, if I'm on this super extreme, let's say we have a horseshoe pattern. So we have this horseshoe pattern, and I'm over here on this extreme part of the empath. And then the narcissist is over here on this piece of it. And they have like the most hardest narcissistic personality disorder ever. But I'm over here, like, I believe that these two share more in common than than they would be on any other part of this. So the more that you are from this crazy, sorry, I'm using this thing, but so if you're more on this like super empathetic, super empath, high awareness, lots of self-doubt, no boundaries, that is not still not healthy. And most people would say, yeah, I'd want to be around an empath.
Mm,
And it's it's just still is a polarizing area. Now, if
mm,
as we come up, we're learning things from the narcissist of how we stand up for ourselves. So maybe now you have a lot of confidence, or more confidence than you had down here. Now you have confidence and you're setting boundaries and you're saying no, and you're charismatic, you're able to carry out your message, and eventually you get to this equilibrium harmony
mm,
point, which could be somewhere around this area.
mm,
Whereas the narcissist can also do the same thing. They need to learn from the empath, being kind to others, thinking about others over themselves. But the self esteem aspect from the narcissist, the empath can learn from. So when I talk about personal power, it's stepping into this confidence of yourself, or maybe even stepping into a little bit more empathy for others. That these two pieces that are very polarizing at the end, and this is like a really good activity for a lot of things that are polarizing, but we want to be at this equilibrium point.
mm,
So in my book, I'm going to be outlining all of this and how, like, with good visuals of how important it is for us to not just blame others, but like, why does that narcissist bother you? Is it because they have higher self esteem than you and they can stick up? So I had a situation, I can share a story about it. So I was having a disagreement, internally having a disagreement with somebody. And for all intents and purposes, they're going through their life and they're thinking that they're doing a good thing. They're doing the best that they can. But I'm having like an angry feeling towards them of they don't care about anything that I'm doing for them. And I don't even have the throat chakra to like tell them my position and say, when this happens, I feel unseen or walked over, whatever it is. Like, I don't have that part of me that I can say that, but they do have it. And I was like, you know what? I'm not really upset at them. I'm upset at myself for not having the voice to
mm,
speak up for myself in this situation. Now, as an empath, that level of awareness and looking at that situation, I can say, I really admire that they can stand up for themselves. And that is a good quality that I could use more of. And so as I'm looking to incorporate and like remove myself from being such a deep empath to having a little bit more narcissistic characteristics, because not all of them are terrible. Having charisma is great. Having a vision is great. Being able to speak that vision is great. Being able to follow through, having a high self esteem and confidence in yourself is great. Like, there's a lot of valuable personality traits that the narcissist holds that the empath is lacking and can learn from.
mm,
So we have this huge community of people that are like pointing the finger at one another when we should be looking at one another in a respectful way of like, what positive things do they do though? And
mm,
why is that affecting my nervous system and my responses that I can learn from?
mm,
So that has helped tremendously in me leveling up my confidence and personal power, because I took my empathy and I was like, and my awareness, and I was like, but what can I learn from this? I
mm,
know that blaming is not the answer, but what can I learn from this situation that I can grow from and pull nuggets of truth for my system, because I have control over this, not them. So it's been an interesting couple weeks because these huge downloads are coming in, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's almost overwhelming to the system to have these feelings with these really polarizing topics. But to like sit there and tell a whole community, I think I'm at like 400 people have watched that video, telling a whole community that the narcissist is still good and still holds value, even if they've done things to you. But why did that
Mm,
happen? Like, what did you consent to? What did you not speak up for? What made you the doormat to that person to invite them into your house, your temple, and destroy it? What what did you not say? What did you consent to?
mm,
And so it's with this really huge responsibility, like you were talking about, that we start pointing that inward, which is another thing that we're talking about.
mm,
Like this is all inward of these circumstances and how we can take them in. And I'm not saying that anything that the narcissist has done to you is good, but it is an indication of something that you can reframe that story and say, instead of blaming them, you're like, I got upset because they know how to speak up for themselves and I don't. I got upset because whatever the story is, and you can rewrite that story.
mm,
And this could be from, your childhood, or it could be from, like my situation was a week ago, maybe
mm,
not even a week ago, but it was very intense. And I was like, oh my gosh, like running around, like, oh my gosh, like internally, I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm getting it, and it feels
mm,
good when you see it with compassion
mm,
and understanding to others instead of blaming them. Because a blame is just, you're still consenting to it, but you're consenting to the negative side of it instead of accepting it and then learning from that, the codes that you're getting in that situation.
mm.
So
Yeah,
those are some really deep, some
yeah,
really
and you're
deep
right.
concepts.
It really is not just polarizing, but also a sensitive topic because I also suppose that from my own healing journey, it's also I think the awareness for me that um, we might be at different levels of our healing where empathy and curiosity and compassion sometimes it's all it's needed, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes there are people like you who to whom that the self-reflection and looking at the stories and going through those aspects that resonates much more. And I think I've experienced both things that felt good in different levels of my journey. I would say that perhaps someone who has gone through trauma and is in a very deep state of pain, depending on where that person is, I might not go into what is the story here.
Mm-hmm.
I might just drop into the feelings and just really see the person in their pain
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
situation.
everybody is definitely at different levels. There's some people that start off with some of the basic things, like they haven't been on this really long, intensive internal journey like I have. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that they can't learn and accelerate and drop the trauma faster.
Mm,
I mean, I've been through some, sometimes I don't even realize like how much trauma and how much sadness has filled my life until I start telling people about my
mm,
life. And people will say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that you're going through that. How, like, basically, how are you even managing?" So, I'm like used to a certain level of trauma and have had to like walk through these really difficult, heavy subjects
yeah.
it with intensity and how it affects my body and how I can move to release it. So, I do want to chat a little bit about my course and how I've designed it to kind of help bring somebody along.
Yeah.
So my course is called Inner Worth Framework, and the framework piece is that foundation piece of where you really look at your foundation and see how true it is. So we can say, seeing how true it is can say mean to say like, is it stable? Is it something that can carry you through difficult situations? Is it going to hold your emotional regulation at a really high, strong point? Are you going to react to situations without, are you not going to react to situations, but really sit and think about what is this situation telling me? It's really taking a pause and saying, you know what, this, I'm feeling this way, and it's okay for me to feel it. And then moving that feeling through your body and giving it back to God of like, okay, I was feeling jealousy. I see where it's coming from, and I don't feel that way anymore. I don't want to feel that way anymore. I don't want to have to carry that story around. So the purpose of inner worth framework is to show people in as gentle or as intensive as they want a personalized plan for themselves of here you take a test and it shows your emotional frequency on a chart of all the 26 areas of emotional intelligence.
Mm.
So this will show you your self aspect, and then it'll show you your social aspect. Now, when you look at your chart, so you take the test, um, it's it's a little bit of a longer test than just like an internet pop quiz or whatever. It's a little bit more intensive of a test, but it's looking at all these aspects, and then it's putting it into this really beautiful chart that you can look at, and then it has like ups and downs of where you're at. So the chart is from 0, which is very low, dangerous, like very low emotional awareness or intelligence, I should say intelligence, and then it goes up to 15. So you can sit in anywhere in this chart. The beautiful thing about emotional intelligence is that unlike IQ, which is an intellectual, like how you solve problems and how you look at things, instead of that, it is a frequency that you can change. So you can work on different aspects of your system of where you sit in this frequency chart, and you can raise the vibes. You can raise the frequency of each of these pillars. So that's the first thing that I start everybody off with, is having this really deep look into where they're at in their frequency. So they can see what they need to work on, they can see where their shiny great strengths are, and we look at those areas of improvement and we select 3 of those, and then we build a personalized plan of here's what you need to do in order to raise these up to a higher vibration.
Right.
And I think that's great for those out there that are analytical. I love
Mm.
taking quizzes. I love seeing the numbers. I love seeing the changes and analyzing that data. That's just the kind of mind that I have. But I think it's really valuable for other people to have this really nice visual aspect of where am I emotionally? And then after they do that test, there's an option to look at what their human design is and their gene keys are. I'm happy to look at that. So that's an optional thing if people want to do that or not. Some people don't like to look at those things, but I do, and I want to provide that because it gave me a valuable insight into how I make decisions, what my purpose and mission here are, and just kind of added a little bit of insight into what tools I had available
Mm.
for me. So I have that. And then the course itself is group sessions. And it starts with really diving into a self awareness piece of what are emotions, how can I identify them, how comfortable am I with saying, I feel tired, or I feel dull, or whatever it is, like getting really descriptive with the emotions, um, I don't want to say emotions wheel because there's more emotions than on the emotions wheel, but a lot of people use that emotions wheel because it's some of the things that we're wanting to work on. I find that there's a lot of like the one that I had shared has a little bit of happy, but then the rest are all kind of negative. I feel fearful. I feel um, sad. I feel disgusted. I feel angry. And so it had these low level frequency emotions in it. But we really take a deep dive into these feelings because I think before you even start working on changing these stories, you've got to be able to say what it is. You have to say the feeling
Mm,
of for example, when I said I feel jealous, it was a shock to my system because I was like, what do you mean? And then as I was working through it, it took me a few weeks, but I finally got down to the answer of I feel jealous because in my childhood, my father figure treated his own daughters better than me. And that struck a nerve or a chord of I'm
mm,
not important.
right.
So when we can say things like that and really come deep down to the truth of the matter in our own personal journeys, then we can move more confidently through the other piece. So as we're building this, we're looking at really deep self-awareness,
Mm,
and then we're looking into the beauty and connecting in some sort of meditative way and using energetics to move through some of these things. So meditations, activations. And then as we continue on in the latter weeks, it's really putting what is my purpose? What is my frame? How do I move through these things continually? And really building like this nice toolkit of what to do in situations so that when you leave the course, you're feeling very confident with how to recognize a feeling, where to find it in your own system, and then having a really strong frame of, okay, if I need to change this, then I can change it, and knowing it's okay. Because some people just don't think it is. They feel like they have to be stuck in that. So I really encourage people to kind of slowly move through that. And I have a really deep motherly energy. That's just like how I was built and framed. And so it's just a nice little guidance of this is what we can do to move you through that. And I'm sure you teach on some similar aspects, but
mm, mm.
that's my
Yeah. And
course.
and I really wanted to reflect on how this is so beautiful because all the things you've talked about today and all those key moments that you remember and the strengths that you have and the wisdom you acquired, you have literally infused all of that into this program and
Mm-hmm,
framework. It's
mm-hmm,
so beautiful to see how, even as children, we already have the keys.
mm-hmm,
So, and all the things that matter to you, the that purpose, the clarity, the strong foundation, your traits of self-awareness and being inquisitive, all of that you you have brought it forward as an asset in this program. And I always find this fantastic. How every single one of us is so unique and
mm-hmm.
therefore our contribution is one of a kind. And I love what you're doing.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about the coaching piece as well. So, there's a lot of opinions about coaches, and some people think that they're invaluable and some people think that they're not. And I find that having somebody in your court that is telling you the truth and showing you things about yourself kind of moves you along in a faster way. And so when you think about investing in yourself and self-care, like this is a really important piece of self-care, is taking the time to truly commit to yourself by choosing somebody. I'm not the coach for everybody. There could be some people out there that don't want to work with me, and that's fine. I'm very much okay with that. I would prefer to have people that have an excitement to work with me and be in my field of energy and to receive my sight and my wisdom that I can impart to them. Um, but there's people are kind of funny around money. And I just want to say that when you seed yourself with like a financial situation, like let's say it's you want to go to college and you want to learn to be a psychologist, it takes money for you to do that, and you're ready because that's a passion that you have, that is a drive that you have, that's something that you want, is this degree in psychology. I'm using this as an example. And so you go through all the steps of funding that. The other thing is, like, if you had a child and let's say they were being held for ransom, you would do everything in your system because you love and care for that child as much as you love yourself, and no amount of money is going to hold you back from getting your child back. You're going to figure it out. So when you seed yourself, you're basically looking inward and doing this really deep self-love of yourself, because you're like, I know that there's some things here that I would like to change. There's some gaps here and I want to address them. And so there's a huge need for it. And some people, they do get funny around money. I've had to change my conversations, my internal conversations, the way I see it, and know that the value of my energy is backed behind that. But also it's the action of the person who's paying for it. Like you're paying for your own transformation. You can't just give me money or give you money and think, oh, I gave them money and now I'm going to be at the end result in 12 weeks and I'm going to be really good. It doesn't work like that. It's you are seeding yourself and then you're taking the wisdom and knowledge and energy and you're applying it in your own life. So it's like somebody that pays to go to the gym and then they never use their membership. They're
Mm,
not going to get the body that they want if they're not applying that action to it.
right.
And the same thing goes for your emotional body. Is you're preparing to go through this journey and make a transformation and develop a toolkit that's going to sit with you for the rest of your life that you can continue moving on. So I've had many profound experiences with all the coaching that I've done, and it's been invaluable to me. And I love having somebody there that's going to show me things about myself, that's going to push me a little bit further than I would typically go in my safe feeling, frozen uh, survival body. And I want to be in this rest and digest, like open to receiving this information and having an increased mindfulness and using these tools and awareness and gifts and talents that God has given me to share that with others so that we can raise our collective vibration. Because there's a huge need for that right now.
Mm,
Um, so the seeding part, I would encourage you to kind of, if you're having some second thoughts about, oh, I don't know if I want to commit to myself, like really look at why don't you want to commit to yourself. And my program that I'm launching, it's a soft launch. It's not a lot of money compared to the money that I've paid for my courses. And this is a great teaching tool and mechanism for people if they're interested in going along this transformational journey with my course. So
beautiful.
hope that landed.
Yeah. So, um, is there any, oh, how can people find you?
So I'm on Facebook and Instagram at the moment on social media. And then I am restarting my YouTube channel. So they can find me at Amelie's Love in all of those. I think it's Amelie's Love Official on Instagram, but it's at Amelie's Love on Facebook and YouTube. And then Amelie's Love Official on Instagram.
Okay. I'll I'll probably put all the pages where they can find you. And to if they want to know more about your program and working with you, is it the best to reach out to you through one of these platforms, or do you have
Yes.
an email
Hmm.
or a website? So just
Yeah,
direct message.
my my email is coachamelie@gmail. And or if you want to direct message me because you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you can definitely do that. Just find my accounts and send a message, and I will reply back to you, and we'll schedule a 15 to 30-minute conversation and see where you're at and if this is where you the direction that you want to go, and make sure that the relationship is consensual and that you do want to work with me. I'm very protective of my energy because I am an empath and I do tend to like overextend myself. So I want to make sure that everyone understands like the work that goes into it because it does require action. It does require taking action for your life. So
Okay. So if you were to describe who these people are, the people that will be drawn to this program, what are their concerns? What are they overcoming, and where do they want to get to?
people that would want to take my course are typically a woman who feels stuck in her situation. Maybe she's in a relationship that she's unhappy with. So there's going to be some stuckness, some unhappiness, and maybe this internal voice or desire that says, hey, I want you to work on yourself. Like, I want you to feel connected and beautiful and feminine and to have this great connection and open up like that feminine beauty that you are. These are the kind of women that I would prefer to work with. Ones that are ready for it, that hear the voice, that are ready to take action and to it's not the easiest work. It is hard work, but in the end you do become more beautiful. And there are studies that show that if you have higher emotional intelligence frequencies that you will become more beautiful. And it just happens like you're glowing from the inside. That light within you is expanding outward. And so that's the kind of woman. If you're feeling like your light is out and that you don't have anything to give and that you're at your last straw, or maybe you are almost there and you're just teetering like on the brink, let's have a conversation and a chat and see if this is a good course for you. And um, I think it will be, but let's have that chat and see if that's um, in your future.
Amazing. All right, so maybe we'll end our chat here. Is there anything
Yeah,
else you'd like to say, or
I do. I want to say thank you so much to you for hosting this and to everybody that is listening to the message. I hope it resonates, even if we don't work together. I hope that something here resonated with you that is going to leave you feeling better or maybe more open and increase your awareness on some angle. And if you have something that you want to correct me on, I'm so open to that as well. I love to get corrected and know that I'm kind of in this harmonious path. So I'm very much open to that and having that discussion with you guys as well. And
beautiful?
follow me. It's free.
Follow her. Yeah, let us know what your biggest takeaway was from this chat. Definitely share your experiences of misalignment, what harmony means to you, any thoughts or insights that were sparked throughout this conversation. We would love to know and chat with
Yeah,
you
I
about it.
love talking about this. This is like I'm so blessed and honored to be working in this space and to be opening myself up to this. I'm a 6'2" human design, which is the role model hermit. So I feel like I'm going in the right direction and kind of listening to all the messages that God's kind of dabbed here and there. So it's been a great conversation. Thank you so much for